Hi, welcome back, or if this is your first time here, welcome. We are going through a verse by verse breakdown of the book of Judges. And I want to be real with you about why I wanted to start this series. The Old Testament gets skipped a lot. And I get it. It feels like you can be reading another planet. There's strange names and all these wars, laws you don't understand, and you can kind of just want to skip to the New Testament and stay there. What changed for me when I actually started reading the Old Testament closely is that it's full of God. It's not just rules and wrath, it's his character, his patience, his creativity, his love for broken and ordinary people. And Judges especially is one of those books that's wild, as we've seen so far in the first 3 chapters, but the theology is deep. So if you've been avoiding the Old Testament, I want you to stick around. We're breaking this down together, and I think you're going to be surprised by how applicable it is. Today we are in chapter 4. We're going to learn about 2 unexpected characters in the Bible and how God uses them. So let's get into it. Verse 1. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud had died. So the Lord sold them to King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth of the nations. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord because Jabin had 900 iron chariots, and he harshly oppressed them 20 years. So what happens here is the Israelites have gone back to sin. What we see in the chapter above in the last verse is that the land had peace for 80 years, but yet they're back into captivity. God loved them too much to let them go their own way. And notice how the serving time continues to go up and up. First, it was 8 years, then 18, and now it's 20. They're crying out because these 900 chariots is a very impressive military. Deborah, a prophetess and the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to settle disputes. So right out of the gate, we have a woman leading Israel. Deborah is a prophet and a judge, and these are 2 of the most important leadership roles in the entire Old Testament. And notice how the text doesn't make that big of a deal out of it. There's no debate on whether she should be there. God raised her up and she led, and I feel like that's worth just sitting with for a minute. And there's no mention of her husband anywhere else in this story, so she's really taking the center focus in this very powerful role as judge. She summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "Hasn't the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go deploy the troops on Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the Naphtalites and Zebulunites. Then I will lure Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, his chariots, and his infantry, at the Wadi Kishon to fight against you, and I will hand him over to you." So she's quoting the Lord. Remember, the Lord has said this. She's confirming what the Lord has already spoken to Barak. Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." "I will gladly go with you," she said, "but you will receive no honor on the road you are about to take, because the Lord will sell Sisera to a woman." So Barak gets a lot of flack for this. And you could see it as weakness or a lack of faith. But I actually think it's a little more complicated than that. He wanted to take the prophet with him, the voice of God, into the battle. The problem is more so that he didn't really have strong faith independently of Deborah. He needed the external confirmation of her being there in order to move. And I think a lot of us are like that. We need the sign, we need the feeling, we need the person. And while it's not wrong to want those things, the issue comes when you can't move without them. And this actually is going to play a role in a couple of chapters moving forward, so stay tuned for that. I think it's interesting to note, despite all of that, he is actually in the heroes of faith that we see listed out in Hebrews 11. So Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh. Verse 10, Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. 10,000 men followed him, and Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite had moved away from the Kenites, the sons of Hobab, Moses' father-in-law, and pitched his tent beside the oak tree of Zananim, which was near Kadesh. It was reported to Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Sisera summoned all his 900 iron chariots and all the troops who were with him from Harosheth of the nations to the Wadi Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has handed Sisera over to you. Hasn't the Lord gone before you? So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. So with these 900 iron chariots that Sisera has summoned, the armies of Israel were at a great disadvantage. They almost only had foot soldiers, while these men have horses. But there's encouragement. The Lord has handed Sisera over to you. Barak is reminding him of the promise of God, and that is leading him to boldness to come down from the mountain. Verse 15. The Lord threw Sisera, all his charioteers, and all his army into a panic before Barak's assault. Sisera left his chariot and fled on foot. Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as the Harosheth of the nations, and the whole army of Sisera fell by the sword. Not a single man was left. So in Judges 5:4-5 and 5:21, it explains that God helped their victory by bringing a flash flood. And so these muddy conditions ended up making those iron chariots a hindrance in battle. So they ended up not even being a threat at all. Meanwhile, Sisera had fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Hebereth Kenite, because there was peace between King Jabin of Hazor and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to greet Sisera and said to him, "Come in, my lord. Come in with me. Don't be afraid." So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." She opened a container of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him again. Then he said to her, "Stand at the entrance to the tent. If a man comes in and asks you, 'Is there a man here?' say no." So everything seems to be going well. Jael's invited this man in who's fleeing, and she's hosting him. She's getting him something to drink. Now, why did she get milk and not water? Let's keep reading. While he was sleeping from exhaustion, Heber's wife, Jael, took a tent peg, grabbed a hammer, and went silently to Sisera. She hammered the peg into his temple and drove it into the ground, and he died. Oh, okay. When Barak arrived in pursuit of Sisera, Jael went out to greet him and said to him, "Come, I'll show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there was Sisera lying dead with a tent peg through his temple. So Jael invites a man into her tent, and she offers him hospitality. He falls asleep trusting her, and then she drives a tent peg through his head. The text treats this as heroic, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable to read. But I think that discomfort is actually the point. We often want our heroes to be clean cut, and we want justice to look a certain way. But the Bible keeps giving us these stories of people who don't fit into our categories. Jael isn't an Israelite. She had no loyalty to Barak's army. And yet here she is. God used her, her place, and the tools she had. That day, God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites. The power of the Israelites continued to increase against King Jabin of Canaan until they destroyed him. All right, let's back up here. So what just happened? Well, Jael deceived Sisera, clearly. The milk, instead of the water, is thought to believe to put him to sleep. So that's sneaky. And just a little historical context, she knew how to handle a tent peg. It was actually customarily the job of the woman to pitch the tents. And remember, if we go back to earlier in the chapter where Deborah tells Barak that a woman is going to get the credit for what God's about to do, the plot twist is that woman wasn't Deborah, it's Jael. She's the one who ended up defeating Sisera, and this was quite the way to do so. So my takeaway from this chapter is actually a quote from Charles Spurgeon, which says, "If you are content to merely conquer your sins and not to kill them, you may depend upon it. It is the mere work of morality, a surface work, not the work of the Holy Spirit." And in this case, the sin could represent Sisera, Jabin, and Satan. So it's important to kill the sin and not just simply conquer it. And we kind of see how that plays out in chapter 4. I think what gets me most in this chapter is how, in some kind of way, everybody God used was unexpected. We have a woman leading a nation, a reluctant general, another woman doing what no soldier would have done, and the 900 iron chariots that seemed unstoppable, God threw them into confusion. It's a pattern you're going to see over and over again throughout the book of Judges. God does not need the most qualified person. He needs a willing one. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Where in your life are you waiting for someone else's faith to carry you? Because Barak had a word from God. It was direct, it was clear, and yet he still needed someone else's hand to hold. And while God was gracious about it, he also told him the credit is going to go to someone else. I think there's a lesson there that God's promises don't expire because of our hesitation, but there can be a cost to it. Next week, we're reading chapter 5, and actually, we're recounting the same story, but it's being told through ancient Hebrew poetry in this stunning song. We're going to see what it looks like to celebrate God's victory in worship, and also what it means to be called out for not showing up when you were supposed to. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it. Give this video a like, share this with somebody who has been avoiding the Old Testament, and I'd love to know what stood out to you from this study, so definitely leave me a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.